A lot of people are very anti-corporation, and some of the things that they say are correct, but they often get completely wrong the cause of giant corporations. They see them as a growth of a free market, which is completely wrong. They don't know their history. A free market, I think a really good analogy is an environment with animals in it. An environment has a certain carrying capacity. An environment it keeps animals in check because animals eat other animals, who eat other animals, who then eat plants or whatever. And they all have to be in a balance. You can't have wolves going nuts because then the wolves eat all the deer and then the wolves starve, kind of thing. And it certainly shocks the system. What we have today is we don't have a free environment like a nature scenario. Because if we had a free market, we would see a lot more diversity in companies and corporations. But what do we have now? We have many giant multinational corporations, and we have a horrendously high business failure rate for small business, and small business always closing its doors and a Walmart moving in, that kind of stuff. That's kind of the story of today. But what's causing all of this? Well, the only way that this can happen is if the market has a selection process going on, just like in an environment with animals. If there's something going on in the environment, all of a sudden, let's say a meteor hits the Earth. Let's say there's no humans, it's just animals everywhere. And let's say a meteor hits the Earth and it's radioactive. So now you've entered a selection mechanism in your environment, and all the other animals who can't deal with the extra radiation are going to die out. The same thing is going on in the markets of today. There is a selection process going on, and that's why giant corporations are emerging, because they are benefiting on this selection from the selection mechanism. And I'll give you one example. The bigger a corporation gets, the more easily it can pay for, I don't know what to call it, how about ancillary staff? And ancillary staff are lawyers, lobbyists, people like that who can hedge the government, essentially, to make use of the government to benefit them. Small business has no capacity to do that. They are defenseless. And so what happens in a selective environment is you get certain animals doing very, very well and other animals dying off. Same thing in a market, in a selection market. Free market, this doesn't happen. What we have today are selective markets. These markets promote and benefit big corporations who can, because of the environmental conditions, and so one attribute of that environment is the ability to have lobbyists, to bribe politicians, to change regulations in favor of big corporations or certain corporations over others, to monopolize certain things, to block other businesses from access, which is another kind of monopoly. All kinds of that is permitted in this environment today. That's why it's not a free market. It is a selective market. There is a promoting system, or there's something in the water. And what that thing in the water is promoting certain animals over others. Now, in a free market, there is no selective pressures going on other than customers and what they like. What the business does a good job, they get promoted. But in a free market, a business is not going to be able to get too big. It will eventually, in a free market, there will be a ceiling to the size of a company. Eventually, it's just not possible to grow. Now, under certain conditions, maybe there's some kind of Superman running your company. Maybe Steve Jobs might be an example, or Bill Gates might be an example. And they're able to grow a multinational corporation. But I think in a truly free market, you'd have very few of those. Very few. And they, just like in history, if you study some history, monopolies were very, very rare in a very free market situation. Now notice that that's not happening today. So you can see the difference. This is not a free market. It is a selective market. That's why there's tons and tons and tons of multinational corporations. That's why they are being selected for. The environment, the market environment, is conducive to what we have. So it's very important, I think, that people look at it that way, that's what's going on. What is the result? What's going on with the size of corporations, the diversity of corporations, the variety? That is the result of something. And often people get wrong what the cause is. The cause is some kind of selective pressure going on in the market. And regulation will select businesses. And regulation, I'm sorry to say, is done by humans, and those humans are bribable. They are not robots. They are easily influenced, and they're always going to benefit their buddies because that's the political system we have today. That's kind of the fascism we have today, really, when government and business get together and do things for each other, and the customer gets screwed on the end. We're screwed on both ends from this marriage between corporations and government is not good for customers, not good for clients. So anyways, I wanted to put this video out there because I just again and again and again I see a huge lack of understanding with the cause of the rise of corporations, like the Occupy movement. Occupy movement had a valid concern, but it was completely misguided in its cause. Very, very ignorant participants. They saw the government as the savior, as their protector against big corporations. Really not going to happen. This socialists who think that the people will control the state is unbelievably ignorant. So ultimately, in a free market situation, an actually free market situation, you should see a lot more diversity. You should see a lot more entrepreneurship, a lot more companies that find a niche and do well, and big corporations will be a lot less numerous. Only the really, really good ones will be able to sustain such a behemoth, just like in the animal kingdom. Elephants can only get so big, and then it's just too hard. When you have a non-selection process going on, you can only get so big, and then the energy required to move you around, how much food you have to eat every day, it's just not possible. You just can't get any bigger. There's actually a ceiling. The same thing I think will happen with business, is that in a non-selective environment, eventually you just can't manage it. Like I said, you might have some kind of superhero running it, and maybe he or she can do a good job, but ultimately there's going to be a ceiling. But when you have a selective pressure going on, you can ram right through that ceiling because you're being supported by legal or political privileges, which are not beneficial to the customer.